Good afternoon, Philadelphia. Welcome back to the Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860. This is your host, Gary Heasley, in the studio on what is one beautiful summer day in September. Right? I mean, it's amazing outside right now. And I'm joined here with Felice Fine. Felice, welcome back to the studio again.
Thank you so much. I'm amongst greatness.
And and we've also got Ada Nestor back. So, Ada, it's great to have you back in the studio.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, and this is going to be a great show. So what we're going to do today is at 12:30 we're going to be joined again by Brandon Strock, who's been on the show before, who we've gotten to know a bit over this last, 7 or 8 months or something. Brandon is the founder of the Walkaway Movement. You may remember those videos from back in, I think it was like 2018 or something.
Midterms.
When Democrats started showing up with these videos explaining why they were leaving the Democrat Party, which was really because the Democrat Party left them. So we're going to have Brandon on. He's been really active in New York. We're going to hear maybe a little bit about what's going on there with that mayoral race and some other things. At 1 o'clock, we're going to be joined by John Nance. John is a former FBI special agent. He's a columnist at townhall.com. He's been with us before. And we're going to talk a little bit about these Trump moves in D.C. from somebody who has a deeper perspective on law enforcement and practices than a lot of folks. So we're excited to have John back. And then at 1:30, once again, we get Mark Mitchell on, which is always fantastic because Mark, head pollster at Rasmussen Reports, is the one guy who we've used for years for polling data. And you know, when people ask us, how did you know what was happening in 2024? There were a couple of pieces to that puzzle, but one giant piece was the fact that we used Rasmussen Reports work throughout 2023 and 4 to kind of, peer into a bit of what was actually happening in the zeitgeist, if you will. So Mark joins us again at 1:30. We're going to talk about, just the way people are viewing everything that is happening now and these moves that Trump is making and so on. So that's going to be great. It's always excellent to have Mark on. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, of course, kicking off here at the beginning, we're going to hit a few other things.
It's been a slow news week. We really had to scramble to find things to talk about. It would have been just a real quiet 30 minutes to start the show, but we scrambled. We found a few things to talk about.
It is incredible, and we say this frequently, it's just the pace of things is so fast. And it's not just that there is a lot happening in one arena, like foreign affairs. Mm-hmm. It is an incredible breadth of things that is happening. It's foreign affairs. It's now what's happening in health and human services, which is in and of itself a very multifaceted course of events.
Right.
So it's a tsunami constantly hitting shore of new issues and new things and new actions. And I got to tell you, it's encouraging because we've never seen government move like this. And we've never seen, at least not in modern history, government move in the interest of the American people.
Right.
We've only seen them move in the interest of the globalist. We've seen them move in the interest of the leftist movement, this whole shifting of our culture and undermining our nation. We've seen all that. But we've never seen anyone actually move in the interests of the American people. Now, one way that that's happening is this war on the cartels. Now, people that have been listening to this show for a long time or other shows that we do for a long time know that, at least I've been calling for a war against the cartels for a very long time. And I'm not talking about like the war on drugs,
right.
They're going to run some ads. No. I'm talking about special forces operations going in and destroying the entirety of the supply chain training camps and command and control structure of the transnational drug organizations that are trafficking children, labor, and chemical weapons into the United States. And that chemical weapon, of course, that's most well known is fentanyl.
Yeah.
And, they've trafficked enough fentanyl in here. They've killed 400,000 Americans. And for reasons unknowable to us, that has not been a crisis in this country. We're constantly told to be worked up about some other thing. 400,000 dead Americans is not a crisis. Well, as a result, Trump got reelected. And when Trump got reelected, he has been steadily going to war against the cartels. And there are a couple of key elements. Number one, they, meaning DOJ now, not just the U.S. Marshals, DOJ, FBI, and the entirety of the federal law enforcement infrastructure, has been rescuing children in large numbers. They have been arresting the pedophile networks. Not just the one-off guy that shows up at a house to get caught on CBS TV or whatever show that was with that guy.
Transnational pedophile and trafficking organizations such as 764, which I think we'll probably get into with John Nance a little bit later today because there's this big drama with Kyle Seraphin and everything that's been going on there. But he was one of the loudest voices claiming that 764 was not real and that it didn't have a real effect. We're literally watching children be rescued, and we're watching these people be indicted for the crimes that they're committing.
And here's the thing. A story like the story of 764, which is this transnational child trafficking organization, that would have been a national story for months in any other time period. That came and went so quickly, most people don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't know what 764
Well,
is.
why?
They
Because
don't.
people like people like Seraphin were out there telling other podcasters not to bring her on, and that the stories weren't true, and that this was part of the 80s and 90s satanic panic that we all went through.
Well, that may be right, but it's also just this constant flow of big stories.
Yeah.
In 1 week, they saved 13,000 children. 13,000. That's not a big story anymore. We forgot about it.
Well,
So-
it can't be, though. If they make that a big story, if the MSM goes out and pushes those stories, they would have to admit that for the last 8 years, they called those of us saying, save our children, save the children, conspiracy theorists all along knowing the truth.
But
Right.
But here's the thing. There are still people out there that are just now realizing that over 300,000 children were lost. My cousin just told me yesterday, hey, did you know it's like 350,000 children were lost? And I said, where have you been?
Right.
Right.
Where have you been? And it's because the media, it was all lies. It was lies that, you were told for the past 4 years. And now they're waking up.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why we're here today. That's why we're here every Friday. That's why we do the town halls.
Right.
That's why we do all the messaging on social media. That's why you write on Substack. The reason we do all the things we're doing is to get that message out. Because what you find is, in so much media, especially this fake conservative media, they're not actually talking about these issues. In many cases, they're just parroting whatever the Republican Party wants them to say or whatever the globalists on television pay them to say or whatever. They're not actually digging into this stuff. So that is exactly the reason why we're here today, because we can dig into these things. But this pace and scope and scale of stories is so extraordinary that even major stories that would have absorbed 90 days of media coverage a few years ago, now are a flash in the pan. They come and they go so quickly. So one of the stories that has hit this week is the story with Venezuela. Now, I'm not talking about the election stuff. Now, for those that are...
Which we will eventually get to, I'm sure, and it will become a hot topic of conversation that we'll cover later.
We have actually Emerald Robinson scheduled in a couple of weeks.
There you go.
And she's been holding off on reporting this whole thing about Serbia and Venezuela and all that. There's some details there that haven't come out yet, but we will absolutely be digging into that in detail as it hits.
We want to talk about the boat.
We want to talk about the boat. That's right. So this Venezuela thing, if for those that remember, back in 99, this guy named Chavez was elected in Venezuela. It was one of the four most prosperous nations. Argentina and Venezuela are both really prosperous. They have huge oil reserves in Venezuela. And from then to now, Venezuela has been a train wreck. It's been an absolute train wreck. Back, when Chavez was still alive, they were arresting journalists and putting people in jail and all this stuff. And you roll forward to today, they had sort of a Trump, this Bolsonaro guy. And, he was getting elected. It looked like he would be reelected. They, of course, went in and cheated on the elections, controlled everything. And I don't know if he's actually in jail today or if they're just trying to put him in jail.
No, they're trying. He's been hiding out. I don't believe he's there.
I didn't know if they caught him or not yet. But it is a story not dissimilar from the story of the United States and the way we've been overtaken by these globalists who have, used our military and foreign service and our government infrastructure for their own political agenda and profit. So now Trump comes in. Tren de Aragua was never a factor in the United States until, a year and a half ago? 2 years ago?
Right.
And then suddenly we heard they were arriving in buses in New York, and then, then people were looking for them there. Then we heard, well, wait, they're in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're in 14 states, and they're taking over, if you remember the Aurora, Colorado story, They were taking over apartment buildings and telling the people in those apartment buildings that they should now pay their rent to Tren de Aragua, not to the landlord. And the response from Democrats was classic. They said, well, it's only a few apartment buildings.
Right. What's the big deal? It's just a couple apartments.
Right.
What? It's okay.
Yeah, it was was amazing to hear that reaction. But that's their reaction to about everything, right? I mean, if you're going to systemically undermine and destroy a nation, one of the ways you do it is by bringing in these transnational gangs. Now, if you look at their role in Venezuela, they play a very serious role. The things the government doesn't want to do, they farm out to these gangs. And there's a hierarchy of gangs. And the higher up you are in that hierarchy it determines what weapons you get, what crimes you're allowed to commit. You know, sort of where you are in the pecking order decides that. And that pecking order is determined by your relationship to the government. It is really an effective system if you want to implement tyrannical, Soviet-style tyrannical government. So anyway, these guys come in, they establish this. Trump takes over, starts exposing what's going on in Venezuela, which we'll be talking about more in the future, and then he attacks this boat.
Yeah.
Now, we've been calling for physical kinetic war against these cartels maybe since they killed the first 100,000.
Right.
Right? The people of Mexico would love to be free to these cartels. Not so much the government because
people, not the government.
Right.
Well,
The
no, we just saw that this week. There was a big hubbub in, I guess, the House, whatever the Mexican House, the parliament that they have there. And it essentially was someone who was in agreement with Trump and our government that we need to do something about these cartels. And the guy attacking him was one of Maduro's guys who is paid off to support the Venezuelan way of life, I guess. And it boiled over in, majestic fashion on video in their parliament or in their house.
Yeah, the money that these, tyrannical governments have to use for those kind of purposes to buy people, of course, they've purchased a lot of Americans, right? Law enforcement. There is no way that the United States Congress and the federal administration for 4 years abdicates control of our border, gives it to these transnational criminal organizations, and no one's making money.
Right.
Billions and billions of dollars made, trafficking children, drugs, and labor, and nobody in government was making money? Not a chance.
Nope.
They were in on it. Nobody would undermine their own nation like that unless they were committing treason for cash.
Well, and so publicly doing it, like publicly supporting illegal aliens over your own citizens. There was just a House member in the U.S. last week who said, I have a lot of constituents who are undocumented immigrants. No, you have constituents who are citizens. The undocumented immigrants are here legally and should have no bearing on the decisions that you're making for your voting base and constituents. It makes no sense to me. They admit it openly. Right.
It's incredible. So Marco Rubio then is, speaking about this the other day. Gabby, if we could, let's play clip one with Marco Rubio.
You're wrong in your question. Number one, Venezuela is a major source, and the reason why is the following. And I've seen a lot of this reporting, and it's fake reporting, and I'll tell you why. It says that somehow Venezuela is not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in the drug. I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro is indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. That means the Southern District of New York presented the evidence to a grand jury, and a grand jury indicted him. And then a superseding indictment came out that was unsealed about a year and a half ago that specifically detailed Maduro's actions. So number one, let there be no doubt, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and he's a fugitive of American justice.
I mean, there it is.
A $50 billion bounty on this guy's head, and he's a head of state.
Right.
And then Trump repositions naval assets all around Venezuela. And then, they take out this boat full of Tren de Aragua people.
And then you have the media going to Marco Rubio, crying with their little bleeding hearts about the poor drug traffickers who were killed in the Gulf and how Marco should somehow have to answer to that or disagree with the premise. Well, the premise is clear, and Marco Rubio is the best person to be in that situation right now. I am so impressed with Marco Rubio. Can I just say additionally, that man is incredible, and he hasn't taken anything from anyone this time.
And I think that's why they call him Marco 2.0.
Yeah.
Right?
Incredible.
This isn't the Marco Rubio of Trump term one or, his days in the Senate. Now, he did serve on the Intel Committee, which is constantly, is always a worry, right? When somebody sits on Intel, they're a target. They're way too close to the intelligence community. They could be compromised. They could be working against us. But he is certainly not appearing to do that now. He is just hitting on all cylinders. It's been great to watch him work. But now here we've gone to, a point where we're actually fighting back against these people. Now, again, I'm going to set aside the election stuff. We'll talk about that in a later show. But the collaboration with sending Tren de Aragua here, sending the people out of their prisons here and saying, go up there and destabilize the U.S. Look, we had enough gangs, right? We said previously, in Chicago, there are 59 gangs,
Wow.
49, 59 gangs, 100,000 gang members. We didn't need another one.
Right.
We have plenty of gangs.
We don't need to import gangs.
No, we didn't need to import. And here they send them up.
Or their drugs.
Now, the fact that Trump went kinetic and actually killed some gang members on one of their boats is a refreshing start.
No, we are the world police. That is what everyone's saying. What are we, the world police? What right do we have to be going out and bombing people in the middle of the Caribbean? What right do we have doing that? I'm sorry. I think that's what's been happening around the world for generations.
Well, and it's different. The world police thing is something that I think tracks when you're talking about a conflict that does not directly affect American citizens, right? You can have that debate all day.
Yeah.
This is not that.
This was on our border.
Not to mention, these drugs are killing our children.
Yes.
They're pressing them into pills and marking them like other drugs. These kids are taking a single pill from a friend of theirs, and they have no idea that will be the last thing they ever do. So if this is what we need to do to protect our children, to protect our future, then this is what I voted for. This is
That's
it.
right.
This is what I voted for,
Well,
no doubt.
And you hear me constantly speaking out in opposition of wars that I do not think serve our interests or that we're not being told
Right.
the truth about,
Right.
where our foreign service and our military are being used against us, our intelligence services are working for who knows who, but not for us. And they're creating all this havoc and bloodshed around the world. This one, they're actually attacking someone who's invaded the United States. This is a strike in our interest to
Right.
defend our nation. And suddenly that then makes us the world police.
Right.
No, that doesn't make us the world police. No. That makes us a nation that's beginning for the first time in 4 decades to defend itself.
Yes.
That's what it makes us.
Now, I don't know which reporter asked the question. Obviously, this clip starts after the question, right? But I would almost guarantee, I would definitely bet $20 to anyone who wants to take the bet that same reporter had been reporting 2 years ago that we should be deeply involved in Ukraine, that we should send our sons and daughters to Ukraine to defend Ukraine and their border. So,
But not ours.
Not ours,
No.
right? This actually affects us directly, and we better not get involved. But, those other conflicts that don't affect us directly, we should definitely send our children.
Yeah, we need people in Mali.
Right.
Right. We need people in far off lands. We need 70,000 troops or whatever it is still in Germany.
Right.
But no, defending the United States, that's unthinkable. You can't do that. I am so excited to see a government that's actually taking action against these groups that have done so much harm, killed so many people in this country, and then imported all these folks that have caused mayhem.
The UN is lying. They are wrong. When you think about the UN, most people have a really skewed and improper view on what that body is. And what that body is someone who puts people like Iran on their Human Rights Council. Okay? So, these are not the people we should be taking our geopolitical or financial advice from. They have different goals. Their goals likely more closely align with the WEF's goals, which include owning nothing and eating the bugs. So, hard pass. Thank you, Marco Rubio, for calling it out so directly. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about is the big the stuff that RFK Jr. was talking about yesterday. What he was doing yesterday was remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, he really covered a lot of ground. Now, this is the guy that started out as the Health and Human Services guy who came out in a cabinet meeting months ago and said, we have taken Health and Human Services out of the child trafficking industry.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were in the I did not know that that's what we had hired these people to do, to traffic our children.
Right. And of course, you're being
When did that
facetious
happen?
because you did know, because you
When did
you
that
talked
happen?
about it. But it ought not ever have happened, and yet it did. And so here we've got, the sitting Secretary of Health and Human Services saying things like, we're not doing that anymore. And he talked about that yesterday. But he covered a lot of ground yesterday. And
Much to the Democrats' dismay.
Oh, they were
angry.
they were losing their minds.
Really
Yeah.
angry.
Really losing their minds. So
I love that for them.
So we've got a clip here. Why don't we just go to one of the clips? Let's go to clip number 2. Gabby, if you could.
About anything you've done or plans to change it. And my last comment is, I hope that you will tell the American people how many preventable child deaths are an acceptable sacrifice for enacting an agenda that I think is fundamentally cruel and defies common sense. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do I get a reply? Or, Senator, you've sat in that chair for how long? 20, 25 years, while the chronic disease in our children went up to 76%. And you said nothing. You never asked the question why it's happening. Why is this happening? Today, for the first time in 20 years, we learned that infant mortality has increased in our country. It's not because I came in here. It's because of what happened during the Biden administration that we're going to end.
I'm going to let Senator Wyden respond briefly to that, and then we're not going to.
So, this is preposterous. Listening to these senators come back with these silly comments. And they're trying very, very hard to make sure that RFK doesn't really have a chance to explain what's actually going on. Because the one thing they don't want is the truth of this situation coming out.
Yeah, I mean, it was an impressive hearing. I didn't watch the whole thing just because life is busy. But I've seen a ton of clips. And it does look like he held his own. But the Democrats did what the Democrats always do. They go up, they take their 5 minutes or 3 minutes or however long they had this time, and they push where they want to push. They use up all the airtime. They give very limited amount of time to whoever is the one testifying to respond so that it's only their talking points that survive at the end of the day. And RFK doesn't play that way. I appreciate, I understand that all of us are not on the same page with RFK on many topics. But on this topic, on MAHA, we are all aligned, and that must kill them.
Yeah, it really must. And, there is we are obviously very, very hard on the Republican Party because we expect more from them. Like, we expect Ron Wyden to go out and speak on behalf of his sponsors in pharma.
Yeah.
Right? Who are his constituents? Well, they're not the American people. No. They're not the people in his district or his state. It's pharma. The people that are writing him checks. The people that, somehow make sure that our elected officials like Ilhan Omar go from basically no wealth to $30 million in just a couple of years, sitting at a $175,000 a year job. That's who their constituents are. That's who they serve. We did a town hall last night, and someone said, they work for us. And people say this all the time, this delusion that somehow these elected officials work for us. They don't. They work for the people that are writing them the checks.
They're supposed to,
but
they don't.
Yeah, I said to the guy, well, that's the theory.
Yeah.
That's a cute theory.
Yeah, yeah.
It's quaint. It's old-fashioned, right? It's funny almost. But no, they don't work for us. They work for the people writing them the checks. And what the Democrats showed in that hearing yesterday was that pharma writes them the checks. Now, to be fair, it's not one side. If you go back to Trump term 1, when we had Trey Gowdy and Paul Ryan in place, right? Trey Gowdy would get into these hearings, thank every government employee for their incredible sacrifice and service, as if somehow having a well-paid job is in federal government where you could work 30 hours a week is somehow a sacrifice. But he would do that, and then he would, ask these tough questions and pound his fist, right? And then he would come back and make sure nothing ever happened. The difference now is that as RFK is talking about these things, he's actually taking actions to make changes at Health and Human Services, CDC, NIH, and all the rest to make the nation healthier, to actually fulfill the obligation and the responsibility and the mission of that agency. So it's great. And he's calling out the government itself. Gabby, there's another quote here. Let's go to, I think, clip 3.
About everything. We were lied to about natural immunity. We were lied to about, we were told again and again the vaccines would prevent transmission, they'd prevent infection. It wasn't true. They knew it from the start it wasn't true because that's what the animal studies and the clinical trials showed. We were told that there was science behind cloth masks. The CDC allowed the teachers union to write the order closing our schools, which hurt working people all over the country, and then pretend it was science-based.
So here you have the Secretary of Health and Human Services coming out and admitting what we've all known and what we've talked about on the radio, that the government lies to us constantly.
Yep.
Big Pharma's lied to us about everything. That Big Food lies. They aren't telling us what's in that food that's poisonous. They're just putting complicated words in the ingredients and no one knows what they mean. This is so refreshing to have someone who's representing us at the federal level, at a cabinet level position, come out and actually tell the truth, that the government lies. And firing all these people, which again is making the leftists and the globalists and the pharma guys and Big Food go crazy, because those are the people they control. That's where they have the relationships. Those people expect to retire from government and go to work at Big Pharma, go to work at Big Food, Big Ag, in the companies that they're supposed to be regulating. And he's just throwing them out and replacing them with people who have a greater dedication to the health and well-being of the country. Again, the fact that these Democrats and others are refusing to accept that we have a problem, that somehow chronic illness is not supposed to be a core feature of our culture, that our children aren't supposed to be chronically ill, right? We've got one more clip here. There's another thing that they were really going after him about, which is the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And was it Elizabeth Warren, right?
I believe so, yes.
Right? And she was saying, how dare you take this off of the recommended list?
Right.
Because now people can't get it for free. As long as it's on, the government pays. They get it for nothing because the government constantly pays. The government pays those companies billions of dollars. And his response? Well, it's classic. Gabby, can we play that last clip?
We have to acknowledge that there was a cause. We acknowledge that there was a benefit. We can't quantify either one because of the data chaos at CDC. And that's all I'm saying. And they think I'm being evasive because I won't make a kind of a statement that's almost religious in nature. Did it save 1 million lives? Well, there's no data to support that. Or maybe data, there's no study, there's modeling studies, there's faulty data. I'm not going to sign on to something if I can't do it to a scientific certainty. It doesn't mean that I'm, anti-vax. It just means I'm pro-science. We have to.
It's the religious fervor, right? It is the radical people who removed faith and religion from their lives, and the atheists who say they don't believe in anything, but they replace that faith with an unreasonable faith in science, and people like Fauci and boards of directors who work together to come up with reports not based in reality. Like, they've just transferred their faith to another entity.
That's a great point.
It's not, and he's 100% right. You are expected to adopt whatever it is they're saying with the kind of fervor that a Christian would defend Christ with. Like, that is what they expect from you. And if you have anything to say or you disagree slightly, then you are anti-science, and why don't you trust the science?
Right. And this thing about science is hilarious. The way they talk about science as if what they're saying is somehow support, as if there's some scientific basis to put on a vaccine schedule for children, vaccines that have never been tested, that have not put out any of the data that they've actually captured from whatever they did test, where tests back in the early days of the COVID attack, where they put all the people who were in the control group into getting vaccines so that there was no control group, so the test wasn't valid. I mean, and to come out and claim that somehow that's science, and it's not scientific to take these things off, when we have news articles coming up now daily. There was one the other day about how suddenly we're having people under 40 that have an incredible surge in cardiac issues.
And cancer.
But the cancer too. But this headline comes out, people under 40 having cardiac issues, no idea why.
Yeah.
Suddenly,
What a surprise.
It's a total mystery, absolute mystery.
Mind you, in 2020, at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, we all had access to old mRNA technology studies where they did not proceed with the tech because the studies were so flawed, because the outcomes were so poor. And do you want to know what the number one issue was with all of those? Cardiac issues.
Wow.
It was completely preventable and easily predicted. And now we're watching it unfold. We're seeing young kids, like There are now cardiac tests to get a sports physical if you've had that vaccine. It is well beyond what we expected it to be or feared it might be. And to finally have someone talking about it openly, hopefully, will protect more kids because it will wake their parents up to the dangers of this. But what we're seeing right now is just the pharma individuals pushing back, the pharma-owned congressmen and women. You have, Elizabeth Warren, we can all pull up your finance records. We can all look at your campaign finance reports. You can go look at every single person who gave RFK Jr. a hard time yesterday, and you can track back the number of donations they're getting from Big Pharma. So, it's pretty easily traceable if you just follow the money. And then their theatrics from the dais look so much more fake, look so flat. They mean nothing when you find how much money is paid for them to do it.
Yeah. And when RFK stopped in the middle of one of the questions he was being asked, it's not a question, it's just a nonsensical attack. And he said, well, you got paid $980,000
Yep.
from Big Pharma. Just calling them out straight up. Those are their constituents. Now, some people expressed, empathy for him being put under such pressure. I have no empathy for him.
No.
This guy's been in the fight one way or the other, lots of fights his whole life. He relishes this fight. This is what he signed up for.
Yeah.
This is a guy that is the warrior fighting the battle he asked to be allowed to fight. I don't feel bad for him. I feel glad for him. He's doing what he was intended to do, what he wanted to do, what he asked to do. This is the fight. No, it's not unfortunate. It is fortunate that we have somebody who's willing to stand up there and look at those farmer representatives in the Senate in the eye and tell them that they are wrong, to stand up to their pressure, to not bow to their nonsensical rhetoric, to push back. That's what's exciting about this. Now, I have no sympathy for RFK Jr.
No.
In fact,
Oh, I bet he loved it.
He loved it.
loved
Oh, yeah.
every
yeah,
minute of
I
that.
kind of envy him a little bit.
I
I mean,
do
come
too.
on,
I'm so jealous. Yeah.
He's right in the middle of one of the most
Right.
critical fights in our nation. This is the guy that got to stop HHS from trafficking children. He got the privilege of doing that.
And now you have people like Rachel Walensky out there doing speeches talking about how dangerous this is for the health of our society. Ma'am,
Please.
you went on MSM and said that if you got the COVID vaccine, you could not transmit or contract it, not contract or transmit, over and over again. And those both statements turned out to be completely false. So if these are the people who are out there crying about the decisions Donald Trump has made for this country and the health of our children, then I think we're on the right track. Like,
Yes.
honestly, that's how it works for me. If the people who made bad decisions are unhappy with what we're doing, we are doing the right thing usually.
That's right. Now, that's right. This was an extremely exciting hearing. This guy's doing a great job. Firing all these people is exactly the right thing to do. He said yesterday, I've got to fire more. I haven't fired enough.
Right.
Great news. And just generally terminating all of these radical activists out of the federal government is the best thing that could happen. And beyond that, we really don't need them. If they fired another 100,000 government workers tomorrow, who would notice?
No one.
No one would notice.